aspects of disaster management. So, but still, whatever things are there from my perspective will go on. Is it okay?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Yeah, my voice and screen must be clear.
Yeah, it's clear, sir.
Yeah, so we'll move on. All right. So we know one thing is very, very important for us to understand that whatever we see on the earth, actually, it is the product of hundreds of millions of years of evolutionary history. And everything is in equilibrium. That's what is the law of the nature. That as we develop, the things try to attain the equilibrium, and hence we are. So it is not over a shorter period of time, but it has taken millions of years to have reached this stage. We know that the earth system as such is comprised of air, water, land, and importantly the life. So that's what the beauty of the earth is, that earth, it comprises of all those things, and this is what is the equilibrium, this is what is the balance, whatever it is. And once this balance is there, it gets disturbed, then what happens that the things, they become out of control, like even the flooding. Once the river is flowing in a channel, there is no impact. But as it crosses, or once the wind is blowing, it doesn't have any impact. But once it crosses the limit, then only it brings in the hazard or the disaster and all. So we must understand that these natural processes are of importance, and hence we have to move on with them. And these earth processes, whether they involve lithosphere, hydrosphere, or atmosphere, and once they interact, then only if they cause loss of life and property, then only it is a hazardous condition, or it becomes the disastrous event. Otherwise, these elements are very, very important to sustain the life. So what happens that if geoprocesses, earth processes goes on, like if there is a flooding of a river and no human element, means nobody stays there, then that's the we consider it as a nature of the river. Like if the land is there and if it slides down, then that is what is also considered to be the earth processes. But if when it slides down and the human element is involved, then the situation becomes hazardous. So we must understand that these hazards, they are the property of the earth, because it involves lithosphere, hydrosphere, and atmosphere. But if the till the human element is there, if the landslide occurs in the mountainous region, there is no human element, so there is no impact. So that's what it is. And the purpose of such talks, the purpose of such programs, is to mitigate or to reduce and prevent the losses from such events. We know that if there is a rock lying on the top of the earth, that's what is hazard is. All right. And once the hazard is there and the people are there, then the hazardous condition of the people is there. And once it falls onto the people, then it becomes the disaster. That's what hazardous condition, and the disaster is important. All right. So we must understand that there is a hazard, and then that hazard may get converted into the disaster. But if we control the human element, or if we control the hazard, probably the disaster will not occur. So that's what we need to understand. So as such, a hazard is any phenomena or physical event or human behavior also, which can result in harm to human, destruction of property, social disruption, or environmental degradation. We must understand the hazard is a phenomena, and once it interacts with the community and the population, then two things are there. The community may be able to cope up with the hazard, then it is a no disaster. But when it is unable to manage the with the current resources, it becomes the disaster. So that's what we must understand, that hazard is a natural phenomena. But if we control the hazardous condition, we control, then it remains hazard only, and it is not as disastrous as it can be. And second thing is that disasters are are not totally discrete events. Means they don't occur at different times, different places. Like wherever river is there, there only the flooding chances is there. Wherever coastal belt is there, there only the cyclone chances are there. Wherever the steep hills are there, there only the landslide chances are there. Wherever two plates they collide, there only the chances of earthquakes are there. So the possibility of the hazard, occurrence, time, place, and severity of the strike can be reasonably and in some cases accurately predicted by the technological and the scientific advances. We know that, like if the river is flowing, that when there is excessive rainfall in the watershed of the river, the chances of flooding is there. So we know all these things so very accurately, like in cyclone also can be predicted. And it is seen that there is a definitive pattern. I said that like cyclone is there, so the sea surface temperature and building up of the cyclone is there. Same way, the excessive rainfall is there, so the building up of the flood is there. Same way, the stresses are there, so the building of forces for earthquake to come are there. So what happens once the definitive pattern is established, then we can definitely reduce the extent of the impact of the damage, so that although we cannot reduce the extent of damage itself, but we can reduce the impact of the damage by properly studying and by properly knowing. Why are we worried? Because the earth population is increasing, and as the population increases, more people have started living in hazard prone areas. And the second thing is the populations are becoming hyper concentrated in the cities and towns. So what happens that the chances or the vulnerability of the cities and towns are also increasing, and at the same time we require a lot of resources to cater to the needs of the population. So the consumption of resources is also increasing. So what happens that altogether, as we are moving towards the hazard prone areas, we are getting hyper concentrated, we are utilizing resources, so we are increasing the risk. And it is seen that it is known that uh, around there are around 80 billion people, they live, they are there on the earth, but around 8 billion people, but around 50% of them they are in the cities. And it is expected that there will be too many people, and more than 40% of the total cities are in the coastal areas, so which are prone to one more hazard, that is the severe storm or the tsunami damage is there. So every day the risk due to one hazard or the other is increasing. It has been seen that during the past disasters, the impact of the disaster in the low human development areas is more, and more number of people kills, they get killed. And as we develop, the less and lesser impact on the human being they are there. So it means we know that Asia, especially India, we are low human development region, and as we are low, so the loss is also supposed to be the highest. These are some of the places. This is the town, this is the place which is one of the most touristically important place, and near in Bangkok people used to go there. But in 2020 in 2004, when there was a tsunami, you can see that it was totally devastated. So at times there may be a case when you may be safe, but the place where you are visiting is not safe. So always find out the possibility, such possibilities of the safety. Now, by now, you might have understood in the last few days of FDP also that you cannot stop the earth processes, as well as you cannot stop the population growth. China, they tried to control the population, and later on they found that their population is under mental stress. So they also have reduced. So if you cannot stop the earth processes, you cannot stop the population growth. So, and you want to reduce, mitigate the hazard, then you have to do the scientific study, so that scientifically you know precisely what and where any hazard may strike. You can educate the population so that they know what to do in what sort of hazard. And then there can be the changes in the engineering structures, and like building practices and all. And After these three things also, it doesn't mean that you can stop the earth processes. So the disaster management plans and hazard response scenarios is a must. 2004, after the tsunami, as I showed you also, it is considered to be the year of disasters, because during that time lot of disasters they occurred on the surface of the earth. There were almost 10 typhoons or 10 cyclones in the main Japan, and there were some earthquakes on 23rd October, or even the 26th December resulted into the tsunami, as I told you. So it is seen that many of these disasters could have been avoided if the people paid more attention. And second thing comes, which is very, very important, that the people's perception, people's attention has given a more loss. So now what do you prefer? You need to think before moving on. That when life is at stake, what do you prefer? Will the family members who lost their beloved ones be happy with insurance money after the funeral, or take the necessary steps so that that condition doesn't arise? I know that most of you would like to say that the better is to prepare so that the loss of life is not there. So that's what it is important for all of us to realize, that if we are not prepared, we don't take proper action, probably we'll be caught unprepared, and then we may have to get money from the insurance company or somebody to repay the loss. That is not the right practice. Otherwise, it is seen that if there is a growth and disaster strikes, so you can understand that the normal growth period, well-being index, it goes on. But if the disaster strikes, finally it may bring down the growth period and all. So it is very, very important for us to understand. UN has declared 1990 to 1999 as the International Decade for Natural Disaster Reduction. So United Nations, they thought over it and then they decided. And in 1999, they have started making the international strategies to counter the disaster. They realize that disasters cannot be countered by one country because they don't follow the borders of the countries. So they decided, they formed the United Nations, UNISDR, the disaster risk reduction framework. And accordingly, Yokohama and Sendai frameworks were created. And it was seen that in between 1995 to 1999, the developed world lost only 2.5% of the GDP, whereas developing world, like countries like India, they lost 13.4% of the GDP, which is a huge loss. So we must understand. Now, by now, we already know what sort of hazards are. Like if I'll ask you the hazard, you will tell me earthquake, cyclone, tsunami, flood, landslide, like this, you can tell. So hazards are already known. So once the hazard are known, then we know that what are the elements at risk. Like if the earthquake comes, what all elements are at risk, and like that we know. So elements at risk means that's the damage potential of the hazard. Once we know these two factors, we can find out various natural features and the societal elements, and then we can prepare accordingly, isn't it? So that's what is very, very important for us to understand. Like societal elements means people and livestock, huts and semi-permanent houses, weak buildings. They are the elements which will be at a risk. So that's what we need to think of. So risk basically means it is the probability of harmful consequences or expected losses, death, injury, property loss, livelihood, economic activity, whatever such activities are there, expected losses, which whatever disrupted or environment damaged. So resulting from interaction between hazard and the vulnerable condition. So risk is the probability of occurrence of any hazard, and D is the damage extent of damageability. So what happens that of any point, if I'll tell you to find out the risk of your college, risk of your home, risk of wherever you are living, you can find it out by knowing the harmful consequences or the expected losses at wherever you are, and due to certain probability of occurrence or extent. And same way, you can find out the vulnerability. Vulnerability means if there is a town, the office of the chief minister or the office of the deputy commissioner is more vulnerable because that person is taking control of the district or of the state. Same way, if you are living in an area and you are the earning member, then your life, you are more vulnerable to those who are dependent on your income. So that's what vulnerability is. So vulnerability technically means it is the condition of physical, social, environmental, and economic factors or processes that determine the susceptibility of a community to the impact of hazard. So that's what is important. And the extent to which a community structure, service, or geographical area is likely to be damaged or disrupted by the impact of a particular hazard is the vulnerability. Once the risk we know, depending upon the potential of occurrence of the hazard, the extent of damageability means vulnerability, then the third concept comes in the capacity. Capacity means, as I told you, that hazard may occur, and then whether you are able to cope up the hazard, then it is no disaster. If you are not able to cope up the impact of the hazard, it becomes the disaster. It means there is in between, there is a capacity is there. Capacity to bulge, capacity to withstand the forces along with the due to the impact of the hazard. So efforts aim to develop human skills or societal infrastructure. Like if there is a landslide and you have got number of JCBs, the moment landslide occurs, the JCBs work and they clear the road, and there is no disaster. It was hazard and it remained hazard. If the flooding occurs and there is a canal is there and the flood water is taken out of the canal, then there is no impact of the flood. So that's what. Or if the earthquake occurs and the buildings are with dampeners and all, and building absorb the shock and there is no damage. So what happens, that's what is the capacity building is. And so that the level of risk is reduced. Capacity building includes development of institutional, financial, political, and other resources such as technology as different levels and sectors of the society. Like we are organizing this program. This program is also capacity building because once you will go to your home, you will have the knowledge of disaster management, and with this knowledge, you will be able to save, if even a one life. That's what is the capacity building is there. Before moving on in any area, if or say in your house also, if we want to know that what are the sectors at risk because of the landslide, because of excessive wind, because of tsunami, because of flooding and all, so you can know that what are the areas which are at risk. So depending upon the risk, you can work on, like if the earthquake is coming and your some of the almeras and all they jerk, so it means almera is not fixed properly, so you fix it so that when next time earthquake comes, it is less jerk, it doesn't fall. And anything which is loose like TV and all, you can tie them. So any sector, whatever sector is at risk is already known, so that without wasting time we need to work on it. Like the hospital service, we know that what sort of services are available, and hence they need to be retained, retrofitted, and regained for working forward. There is a disaster risk is also there. The disaster risk in any place, say because of flooding, because of earthquake, because of any reason, can be calculated. So that the first thing is to know the disaster risk in any area, you need to know the hazard. So hazard means what is the probability of occurrence of flooding or any hazard, or what will be the severity. Like the earthquake may be of 1 magnitude, may be of 8 magnitude. So 1 magnitude won't be felt even by the animals, whereas 8 magnitude may disturb may destroy everything. So there is a severity of any hazard is very very important. Like there may be flooding, but the flooding has not crossed the limit of coping capacity, so it is not that severe, whereas it can be very severe also. So to determine the disaster risk, You need to know the probability of occurrence of any hazard as well as the severity of its occurrence. Then comes exposure. What is the exposure? What kind of structures, what kind of population, what is the impact on economy and the location. Once you know the exposure to any of the features due to the hazard, you can know. And then the vulnerability, you can know the physical, social, economic, and environmental vulnerability. You can calculate depending upon the hazard, exposure, and vulnerability. You can develop the capacity and measures. There can be physical planning that in the event of landslide on the road, what you are going to do. Social capacity, that if there is a flooding in certain area, where will be the next marketplace so that the social capacity is taken care of, or the economic capacity is taken care of. And then in the event of any hazard becoming the disaster, what should be the management aspect. So if you know the disaster risk in any place, whether it is a house and all, it is, you know that it is a function of hazard, vulnerability, and capacity. And as you go on increasing the capacity, the 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 hazard and vulnerability, whatever it is, the if you improve the capacity, the risk goes on decreasing. One important thing is there as we move on, that if somebody tells you that fire is very hot, don't go near the fire. But still, the perception is you will go near the fire until unless you feel the temperature. If somebody will tell you that in these wires there is a shock is there, but still until unless you get the shock, you don't realize what shock is. So what happens that it is seen that the actual risk is huge, but human perception, they think that the risk is always small. Like we leave everything in the name of God, we leave everything in the name of other factors. So what happens that there is a big gap. The risk which we perceive is always very small because we are very positive. Human beings are very positive people, so they don't want to think too much. Like if you'll not lock your house, what all things may happen. The risk you will always consider to be less than the actual risk is. So people always underestimate risk they face and do not take timely preventive action. Like you know that if you drive motorcycle fast, you may fall or you may slip, but still you think that slipping maybe once, so you still take chances. So that's what human thing is, that if the government tells you to evacuate the house because of the cyclone, you still think that do you really need, as if you have become the scientist, you have become the expert, and the government is just for the sake of time pass they are saying those things. So you must understand that whatever is told, as you are not the expert, like if somebody is not well, having fever, every second guy becomes a doctor and says, you take this medicine, you take that medicine. Whereas there is a doctor, there is a specific treatment is there for any medicine. That medicine, after consultation with the doctor, only is supposed to be taken. Because we always consider the actual risk, the recognized risk, too much smaller than the actual risk. Now, disasters are low probability but high impact events are there. The chances of this disaster is very less. Like if I'll ask you how many of you have seen earthquake or say landslide or say cyclone or say flooding, very few people may be there. Those who have seen in your lifetime once or twice, but their chances of probability of occurrence is very very low, but once they occur they are high impact events are there. So they do occur because of the disequilibrium between the hazard in the environment and the vulnerabilities of the communities. We have already understood that the vulnerabilities are increasing as the time passes by because the population is increasing, more resources are to be consumed, and hence the townships are becoming hyper concentrated. So the vulnerability is already increasing, and the hazards, if they are there at the same pace, the impact is going to be manifold increase. And the 21st century is suppose is considered to be the century of natural hazards and complex disaster caused by dramatic increase in the demand for emergency medical care. Now, coming to disaster once again, it is a serious disruption of the functioning of a community causing widespread human, material, economic, and environmental losses. This is what is important, which exceeds the ability of expected community to cope with its own resources. If you are, say, if you are wearing, if you are there wearing a sandal or wearing a torn down slippers and you slip, all right, you may wear a heel, or you are wearing a chappals which are the sole is already gone. So what happens that you may slip. So once you slip, you may you may fall down, then you may be able to get up and walk again. But if you fall down and your bone breaks, the level of impact is increasing. Or if you fall down and you are not able to get up through your own resources, it means that's what you require a help from the other to make you take you to the hospital and all. It means you are not able to cope up with your own resources. So that's what, for the disaster to occur, it needs to exceeds the ability of the affected community to cope with its own resources. So a disaster is a function of risk processes. It results from the combination of hazards, vulnerability, and insufficient capacity to reduce the potential negative consequences of the risk. So you can see that whether it was glacial lake outburst, where the Kedarnath temple was impacted, or it is a flooding or earthquake, everywhere it it exceeds the ability of the affected community to cope with its own resources, then it becomes the disaster. Now, like, by now we already know that if earthquake is there, what all it may bring. So likewise, we know that each and every hazard, if it occurs, what all it may bring. Say if the earthquake occurs, it may bring in the landslide because the land will be shaken. It may, if some dam is there, dam failure may be there. If some building is there, building collapse may be there. If there is a train is there, the train, railway track and all, they may wreck. But utility malfunction may happen, or tsunami may happen. So we know that, like, for every hazard, we know that what all things may happen. So if the landslide may happen, it may bring in the building collapse, or it may bring in the utility failure. If the dam failure occurs, it may bring in the flash floods. So again, it may bring in the building collapse or the utility failure. If the building collapse occur, it may bring in the fire explosion. If the train wrecking occurs, it may bring in the oil spill, chemical spill, it may bring in fire or some pollution. And if multi-utility function is there, it may bring in the fire or the chemical spill, it may bring in the pollution, tsunami may bring in the flash floods. Or so we know that whatever hazard is there, so likewise we can plot what all factors it may impact. We know with reference to earthquake, we are talking that today even a single earthquake, it may occur, it may bring in, take up million of lives, it causes a material damage, raise a mega city, trigger economic depression, render territory inhabitable. It is seen that there has been earthquake in Haiti and in 1987, and the Haiti is still struggling because the country's development has gone 20, 30 years back, and everything has, whereas there has been similar magnitude earthquakes in Japan and all, there is no impact. So that's what we need to understand. Many times we think that there is a God and God can come and help us. So accordingly, in Shimla, last to last year, we know that there was a cloud burst was there and lot of landsliding occur. So there was a Shiv temple, and normally we constructed Shiv temple or some temple or something at the border, thinking that that temple is now stabilize the thing. But when the cloud burst or when the natural nature strikes, even the Shiv temple was completely demolished. So take care during the any event becoming hazard, becoming the disaster. Nobody comes to help you, so you have to be your own help. You have to do it when the timely practice is there. So, like, if one thing occurs, there is a cascade effect. Like if earthquake occurs, it may bring in the landsliding, it may bring in the material damage and all. Same way, if a small thing, intense rainfall occurs, it may trigger the riverbed, whatever sediments are there, these sediments may be transported, and in the way of transportation, they may collide with each other. All right, which may bring in the more damage potential in the river. And if intense rainfall is there, it may bring in the sliding or rockfall or debris flow. So you can understand that simple one rainfall may bring in landslide, may bring in flooding, may bring in damage to the various buildings, and so many things may happen. So, because the rainfall may alter the soil consistency, change the unit weight of the soil, excess pore pressure buildup is there. So all these things they change and then they impact the area. Now, after knowing so much things, after knowing so many of warnings, still if the people they construct the house near the river channel, all right, and when the river gets flooded, their house gets settled. So or in an earthquake prone area they construct the house, tall buildings without proper foundation, the building may fail. Or they construct the bridge with the proper things. You can understand that hazard is already known, but if you just construct wrongly, then it becomes a disaster. So it is the not the hazard which is creating, but it is the disaster which is created by the human activities. That's what is important. If you just construct near the sea, and when these ships and all, when the tsunami comes, they encroach, and then you later on everything gets damaged and you feel bad. And if you construct a juggi, this is the world's largest juggis in Mumbai. So once you construct so closely, if one house gets fire, everything gets fire. If you keep on cutting the trees, you destabilize. Or if you congested,ly you stay or near the sea, as I said, once these ships they encroach during the tsunami, they bring in the damage. So what I wanted to say, hazard of any area is already known. If you remove the human element from there at a distance, then the things become safer. Like if you'll go on constructing, this is a building in Mizoram. It is, you can see the kind of material building is there, other building has already gone, and people are going to see, and nobody is taking a lesson how to construct. They go on trying to save instantly. Say this river is there, they have made a river channel and thinking that river will pass through this, and if more water is there, it may pass through this, but they don't think that the huge building may collapse because of the river water. If the say this is the water and this is the landsliding has occurred, the water is becoming the dam, and once the weight of the water is in equilibrium with the weight of this material, then the material will get cleared and downstairs there will be flash floods, so it will take off everything. So we need to understand this is not because of sudden flash flood, because we have not taken care of, and we didn't release the water so that such a huge pond is not lake is not there. Say same way the building is constructed and the river which was so huge, this much place is given for the river. Now if the water is too much, the water level fills up, it may just push and whole of the building may collapse. Same way you can see that this side of the road is liable to slide down, landslide. Now, if you add weight here, it will slide more. So you can see that 7, 8 layers of this addition of weight. It is a totally wrong place. You'll see that, say, once you are adding, it will go down, again added, again added, again added, and you are adding, and the road is becoming smaller and smaller. So knowingly, if you don't understand, see, whatever way it is. So these are some of the nature based practices, and these are some of the just lying the area like that. So what happens that you need to take due cognizance, due precaution, and that's what capacity building is. Now, in the year 2005, the government of India thought to understand various disasters so that to take proper controlled measures. So they have made the high-powered committee, which has divided all the the disasters into five different types. The first one is water and climate related disasters. These types were differentiated, classified, thinking that they require a similar kind of treatment, because you know that if there is a water climate related disaster is there, means drowning is there, means excessive water is there. So the treatment, the first aid required will be for treating the water entering the body. If there is an earthquake is there, and if the some people they get within the debris or the material buried under that, so they'll require a different kind of treatment because their bones may be broken. So accordingly the different disasters were identified by the high powered committee. So the first one was water and climate related disaster, because these disasters require a similar kind of first aid, like flood, cyclone, tornado, hailstorm, cloudburst, and all. So all these they were under the water and climate related disasters. Even flash floods, tornadoes, hailstorm, uh, dust lightning, mudslides, ice storms, storm surges, all these which are due to the El Nino currents, they are considered to be water and climate related disaster. Even the short term and long term climate changes, El Nino and La Nina changes, global warming, glaciation, deforestation, desertification, all of them they fall under the water and climate related disasters. Second one is geologically related disasters, wherein the impact on bone and the body is more. So landslides or earthquakes or dam burst or mine fires, that they are the geologically related disasters. Then comes chemical, industrial, and nuclear disasters. Chemical, industrial disasters and the nuclear disasters require special kind of treatment. Like you need to wear the CBRN dress, and then only help. Accident related disasters, they require special treatment like forest fire, urban fire, mine flooding, spilling, bomb blast, festival-related stampedes and all, air, road, and rail accidents, boat capsizing, village fire, all such things are there. And the fifth one is the biologically related disasters. We know that, like any epidemics or food poisoning, it requires a different kind of treatment. So the fifth is the biologically related disasters are there. Now, before moving on, we must understand that hazard reduction is equivalent to disaster resilience, that we are resiliating because we need to reduce the impact. Now we know that natural processes are necessary. Natural processes are necessary means that there are some hidden mineral deposits are there, hidden minerals are there. If the natural processes are there, they bring in the process of landsliding, or because of volcanic eruption, or because of earthquake, some of the materials which are hidden, they come to the surface. Natural processes are resources, like after the flooding. During the flooding, lot of silt and all that comes along with the river water. When the river water recedes, the silt deposits on the top of the area, and it is very good for good crop yield. Natural processes are hazard too. We know that natural processes are hazard, so we must understand. And hazards, now when and how they become a hazard, we know that if the natural processes are there, if we occupy those natural processes, definitely it becomes hazardous. So we are living with the risk. We know that any area, whatever risk, like I can tell you to find out the risk wherever you are. So you will see that you are living with the risk. All right. So that risk, as I told you, needs to be actually identified. You don't think that that risk is too small or too meager. So you need to understand that, so that you develop the risk to resilience. You can develop the various processes, various activities, so that you are able to resiliate, and then develop the concept of mitigation. You know that some years back, when there used to be rainfall, people were not coming out of the houses and all. But once proper umbrella is there, the moment rainfall is there, or in during the rainy season, everybody keeps the umbrella, and the moment rain is there and they have got some urgent work, they'll just fold their pant, open the umbrella, and move. So that's what is the concept of mitigation, that we understand. Like the cyclone, when the cyclone came in 1999, it killed 10,000 people. Now, but when it comes now, the more severe cyclone, the government help the people to shift to the proper places, and the impact is less, and even there is no death due to the more severe cyclones now. So that's what is the concept of mitigation is there. Along with this, we need to understand the risk to buildings in India, because in India, if you go to the villages and all, you will see that there are RCC buildings are less, whereas earthen wall or say stone walls, burnt brick walls are more. So it is seen that these there are in 2001 that census was there. So around 73 million uh, million houses, they are made up of earthen material and all right, so around 30% of the total, and stone walls are around 10% of the total buildings, and burn walls are around 44%. So you can see that majority of the buildings, they in India, they are at risk, very high risk or high risk. So you can understand that all these buildings, they comprise very high risk. So that's why the if that's why we fall in the low human development index, and if anything happens, we'll be at more loss. So that's what you need to understand. Whereas concrete wall, wood and Acra walls or GI sheets, bamboo thatch houses, they are very less. So we need to understand the impact, and we need to understand the type of buildings they are occurring. So you can understand that as per the category of building stocks in India, the total houses were that time were counted to be 24.9 million, and out of that, almost 50% of them were at high risk. So we need to understand. And the construction of the building is also, other than the type of the material, it is also dependent upon the site response, means what type of area where the building is constructed. We know that in India, most of the area is covered by the alluvium deposits of the rivers, like the whatever river is there, Ganges, Brahmaputra, Krishna, Godavari, and all. So they are very deep sediments are there. So if you construct houses on top of them, they are always considered to be soft ground. Whereas actual houses made on the ground, they are few. So we such risk of the building also increases. Now we know that disasters are man-made and natural, have affected mankind since time memorial. We know that we are not talking suddenly of the disaster, because now that threshold or the critical threshold limit has reached, because of the population is increasing and the resources are more required, and the availability of the land for the development, it is reducing. So what happened that although this process are time memorial, now there have been significant past earthquakes in India, and accordingly, when the UNDP has prepared, you can see that based on the already occurring earthquakes, depending upon the magnitude, they draw the very high risk zone, all right, or the high risk zone, or the moderate zone, and then the low risk zone. So accordingly, they are there depending upon the earthquake, and depending upon that, you can find your region where whatever things are there. Depending upon the landslide, also the very high risk, wherever red is there, blue is there, high risk, moderate to low risk, very low risk regions are there. All right. So accordingly, mapping is there. Same way for the flooding, wherever rivers are, there only the flood zones are. So accordingly, the flood areas are also mapped. Then comes the wind and the cyclone. So you can see that near the coastal area, the cyclone's impact is more. So they are plotted with very high damage risk zones, and then high damage risk zone, moderate, and like this, the risk zones are mapped. And on the basis of map with multiple hazard, whether it is wind and cyclone, earthquake, or flooding, or whatever zones they are there, and it is seen that almost means in Indian subcontinent, among the world's most disaster prone area, Indian subcontinent is 59% of the land is vulnerable to earthquake, 8% of land is vulnerable to cyclones, 12% of land is vulnerable to flood, 70% of cultivable land is vulnerable to drought because we are agrarian society and we are dependent upon the monsoon. So and only 30% of the area is irrigated. So 70% of the cultivable land is vulnerable to drought. So almost 80% of the area, 84% of the area is disaster prone from one or the other. So we have to be very particular. That's why we are organizing such programs, such courses to understand it better. Now we know that the nature creates hazard. By now you know that the nature creates hazard, but the action of people, societies, and governments create disaster. Because if you will construct your house in a hazard-prone area, your house will tend to fail. If the social economic zone is like that, like if there is a uh, flood prone area. All right, the river is there, flood. So if the river floods, I know that up to this area, the flood water may go, so that area may be converted into the playgrounds for morning walk and all. Then sometimes the water enters here, so there the big buildings may come, the government shops. After that, the road may come, and after that, the common people may stay. So now, if the flood level increases to the buildings, then the for small thing the government offices may not work or small things, so it will not disrupt the earning of the people and all. So the nature creates hazard, but the action of people, societies, and governments create the disasters. This slide is very important for understanding the disaster management. It is seen that the 50% of the victims which are injured victims, which are not trapped but they are injured, they lose their life within the first 4 hours of the disaster. All right, remaining 30% of people which are trapped beneath non-structural elements, they lose their life within the 8 hours of the disaster. Around 15% of the people trapped in void spaces, they lose their life within 2 days, and remaining 5% only, they which are trapped beneath the structural elements and all, they can live up to the 7 days. So now you can understand that the moment disaster strikes, within 4 hours, if the help is not there, more than 50% of the people will die. So you must understand that with the disaster there should be locally available trained teams, all right, so that they are able to provide the help, like we are training you. So the moment you are trained, you should know that how to save life also. So that improvised rescue by neighbors and passers-by near the collapse site or near the disaster site is very important. They'll be able to save 50%, means the major chunk, within the first 4 hours. Only neighbors can be there. That's why Abda Mitra scheme by the government of India is going on, wherein from each block 200 people are getting trained so that they are able to save the life of the people. Then remaining within the 8 hours, community response group. So we need to train the communities so that they provide the response in the nearby areas. They can be there because within 8 hours, to no proper trained team can reach, and then the first response teams can reach after 8 hours and can help, and but they will be able to save around 15 to 20% people only. 80% would already may lose their life, and highly specialized and equipped teams may come and will be able to save 5% people only. So that's what is very important for us to understand, that at each village level, each household level, this the disaster management plan is supposed to be taken care of. The pillars of disaster management by now is, they are, once the disaster uh, strikes. All right. So the first one is the response immediately, then comes rehabilitation, again, then comes recovery, and then prevention, mitigation, and preparedness. So the to strengthen the response, Government of India is emphasizing on mitigation and preparedness, because prevention and mitigation is more important before the strike, this is the pre-disaster era. Sometime back, before 2005, Disaster Management Act, pre-disaster era and post-disaster era, like this, they were not segregated. And the governments were working only post-disaster. And every year, more than 1 lakh crore rupees were spent for the post-disaster strategies. But now the government has started spending in the pre-disaster so that the post-disaster money utilization will be less. So that's what the way the things are moving. And there is a qualitative shift in India's strategy from post-disaster reactive approach to a pre-disaster proactive approach. Like earlier, if some tree is there, all right, and you may think that the tree may fall on your house, and if you go to the government will say that your house, the tree has not fallen on your house, so nothing can be done. But now if you go, that is the post disaster reactive approach. They say that once the tree falls on your building, we'll definitely take care. But the now pre disaster proactive approach means if you say that this tree may fall on my building, they'll go and cut and help you. So that's what it is, a qualitative shift in the India's strategy on preparedness. Like if the house is constructed and another house is there, and you'll say that this house may impact my house during earthquake and all because it is too close, the government will tell that second house owner not to construct, whether the a land may belong to him. So like this, there are a lot many rules have come up for the proactive approach pre-disaster in place of the reactive approach, and so that to minimize the damage, losses and trauma to the people on one hand, and reduce the cost of relief, rehabilitation and reconstruction on the other hand. Preparedness, basically, which is the focus, means any activity designed to minimize loss of life and damage, to organize the temporary removal of people and property from a threatened location, and facilitate timely and effective rescue, relief, and rehabilitation. You know that the before the cyclone, the people are moved to a safer places. So that's what is preparedness is, that there should be a safe place, whether it is a school building or any building. So they have already demarcated so that before the disaster strikes, these people can be taken to a safer location, and they can be facilitated with various facilities so that they are able to take care of everything. Then comes the initiatives are identified to prevent large losses of life and property in future disasters. As a follow-up of Yokohama Declaration, I told you that from 1990 to 1999, when they organized the UN decade, then after that there was a Yokohama Declaration was there, and it was seen that everywhere identification of areas which are vulnerable is supposed to be there all over the world. A techno-legal regime for propagation and enforcement will be there so that proper building, proper structures are constructed. A program for strengthening the existing housing stock so that retrofitted housing stocks are there so that the less damage occurs. So disaster risk mitigation is a consequence of the Yokohama Declaration, and which government of India has taken up is identifying the hotspots of disasters so that which area is hazard prone and is vulnerable also. So that is the hotspot of the disaster, means the disaster risk is more. Identifying the mechanism of triggering the disaster so that if you know that what is the mechanism, like excessive rainfall in the watershed may lead to the flooding in the river. So the like if there is a landslide zone or if there is a triggering of cyclone, so identifying the mechanism scientifically, and then to identify generating a comprehensive dynamic compendium on it, that how to resolve, so that the micro level studies can help resolving the various features. Formulation and implementation of the concrete policy on national, subnational, national, sub-regional, local, and community level, so that those policy formulation before occurrence in tune uh, uh, with disaster management act, like formation of national disaster management authority, state disaster management authority, district disaster management uh, authority and then village councils, so that proper formulation of various local and community level organizations to help uh, taking care of. And the risk reduction should be through early receipt and dissemination of warning. Now, like for cyclones, 6 7 days early warning is given. Similarly, for landslides, warning is given. For floods, warning is there. For tsunamis, warning is there. So early receipt and dissemination of warning is the first thing. Emergency kits at villages. You know that before the rainy season starts, Food Corporation of India starts taking stock of and keeping stock in some of those villages which are far flung, or which get affected due to the excessive rainfall and all. Along with that, there is a emergency kits at villages, so that any village is independent. If during any hazard, this village is not dependent for everything on the next village. So there should be some emergency food material, food grains and all should be there. Identification and plan of action for risk groups, so that the gender wise, like female or the kids or the elderlies, they are the risk groups are there. So identification and plan of action is a must. Train task force at all levels, because the within the first 8 hours we require, because the 80% of the people may get affected. So there need to be a trained task force at all levels, contingency plans and stockpiling of the emergency material. Then comes the mitigation. Mitigation phase occurs before the disaster takes place. Remember, preparedness and all these phases we are talking. Hence, higher educational organizations will take steps to protect the people and property. That's what is decided, while also decreasing the risk and consequences from a disaster situation. So, what happens that higher educational institutions can provide the technology, so that land use management is told to the people, so that to reduce the impact of the disaster, because many a times the people they don't know, and they use the land as per their wish. But if they are told and they are properly asked to move forward with the kind of zoning, then there it will be able to save the reduce the impact of the disaster after proper inspection and all, which higher educational institutes may definitely can do it. Like they can go to nearby villages, nearby places, can find out a rapid visual screening, and they can fortify the building against the damage, so that the impact of hazard can be reduced. After the occurrence of the, the disaster, it is called the response phase, and it is just immediate after the disaster. So higher educational institutions must focus their attention on addressing immediate threats to people, because higher educational institutions, they have got the building, they have got a proper areas. So after that, the occupant safety and the well-being can be taken care of, and they can be asked to stay in higher educational institutions. For recovery is to rebuild after a disaster. It is an effort to return operations back to normal. So recovery phase is after a disaster, which is very, very important. And higher educational institutes in any area should compile the best practices from all over the world and tell the people that this has been how it should be implemented in India. Especially after the Bhuj earthquake in India, there has been lot of good practices and its implementation, so that there are newer technologies and strategies are there, so that the recovery of the people is faster, as per the gender, as per the socio-economic conditions, as per the regional disparities, culture, and the needs of the people. So that's what is very, very important. Now you must be thinking, why are we discussing all these things? Isn't it? Are you thinking this way or not? Yeah. So is really education play important role? Are you linked now? Hello. Yeah. Unmute and say something. Hello. Yeah, I can see, but no one is unmuting and saying anything. Yeah,
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
yeah. So my question is, it's all right. Why are we discussing this? Is really education play important role in disaster management? So it is seen that disaster that education is really important. World over, it is seen that knowledge of different subject and education sector is one of the main parts of disaster management. Remember, it is seen world over. If the society is knowledgeable, if they don't have the resources, still they can save their life. I could have given a lot of examples here. Uh, but face to face is different, but there are a lot of things are there. In the case of fire, what should you do? In the case of flooding, what you should do? And all those things are there. So the knowledge is very, very important. If you hear a specific sound before the occurrence of the earthquake, what you have to do? So that's what is the knowledge is there. Knowledge in disaster affects performance of various sectors and has an impact on different aspects of disaster management. It is already proven. We know that role of higher education institution in disaster management, each and every sector, whether it is a preparedness, mitigation, recovery and response. All right. So whether it is early warning, prevention, reconstruction, rehabilitation, emergency relief, rescue, search and rescue, everywhere, all the aspects, higher educational institutions can play important role. So like in the preparedness phase, the inside the campus, it is recommended that universities and colleges should develop an emergency plan. So if in your college, if you are not aware of, you go and ask your principal or the administration that what is the emergency plan. And if they don't have, although they have, I know that there is a government of India has already prepared the disaster management plan or the emergency plan for each and every college, institution, and everywhere. So there should be demarcation of action steps that give campus officials the roadmap of what to do depending on crisis. Now, if anything happens, in which direction they have to go, what who will be responsible for what, the scope of plan that explains the role and responsibilities of staff and students at different stages. What type of students, which student will apply what kind of work, that's what is important to be explained. Communication method, including communication center that will ensure effective information exchange. What happens that if the information exchange is not good, people they get confused. So communication method is very, very important. Redundancy of critical staff to make sure staff is available in disasters, so that all one kind of staff is running to help one kind of people should not happen. So there should be proper distribution of the responsibilities, especially for the critical staff. Clarified role for campus security and outside agency, because if anything happens, the campus security is a must, and outside agencies up to what place they will be providing the help. Addressing the needs of vulnerable populations such as special needs population that might have certain disabilities or might experience language barriers. So there should be specific role has to be there outside the campus, because once the campus is there, people near the campus, they think that here higher education institution is there, they are more aware, they are more learned, so they are dependent upon any advice from the higher educational institute. So the higher educational institutions should propagate awareness towards disaster preparedness and management through seminars, workshops, and mentor-mentee program together with the students and staff. So remember, if you are in a campus, it is your responsibility, your duties to carry out the outreach program, in-reach program, or mentor-mentee program, so that nearby people they are aware of all sorts of situations, and to deal or under the preparedness plan, what should they do. Awareness campaign drive towards all work of life so as to increase the public awareness on disaster preparedness through students, and provide comprehensive training and courses to widen the knowledge of managing disasters and to teach people how to respond to such events at grassroots levels. And during the specific role during the disaster risk reduction is major role of students is monitoring the natural disaster, knowledge on first aid, rescue, and evacuation, help in the preparation of community disaster contingency plan, aware the parents and community on various types of hazards and what are the preparedness measures to be taken, plantation in the college and university premises, because we know that excessive wind, excessive cyclone, excessive water can take care, plantation can take care, boosting the morale of the community after the disaster so that they cope up, they build up, recover fast. Senior students can help villagers in preparing the village disaster preparedness and response plan. What should they do? The students can be volunteered in first aid teams, rescue and evacuation team, early warning teams in their villages. Disasters in India are becoming more frequent. Annual loss of life and economic loss due to disaster is exponentially increasing, because as the population is exponentially increasing, hence the annual loss of life and economic loss is also increasing. The risks are very rapidly increasing, so time is to act now. You are not supposed to wait. Thinking this, Prime Minister has given 10-point agenda for disaster risk reduction. Remember, the government is also very, very active. So what are these 10-point agendas are? All development sectors must imbibe the principle of disaster risk management, because whatever new things are coming up, whether new building, new bridge, new canal, new road, whatever, so this should have, or the smart city and all. The risk coverage must include all, starting from poor households to small and medium enterprises to multinational corporate to nation states. So risk coverage should be there, means the insurance coverage should be there. Women's leadership and greater involvement should be central to the disaster risk management. It is seen that the women, they link the household and they link the region much better than the men. So their involvement should be central to the disaster risk management. Invest in risk mapping globally to improve global understanding of nature and disaster risk, because risk mapping is important. As I'm telling you that disaster risk, even risk mapping in your house also can be undertaken. Leverage technology to enhance the efficiency of disaster risk management efforts. Develop a network of universities to work on disaster related issues. There is inter university institutions network, IUIN, disaster risk resilience, established by NIDM, National Institute of Disaster Management, Ministry of Home Affairs. So a network is there wherein specialized people, like disaster management is has to be taught, has to be dealt with a specialized people, so that is so that you don't miss, you don't get some of the myths dominate over the actual working. So that's what is important. Utilize the opportunities. That's what PM 10.6 says, that there should be a list of people, those who should be party to train and to take care of such activities. Utilize the opportunities provided by social media and mobile technologies for disaster risk reduction. Build on local capacity and initiative. You know that within the first 8 hours, whatever help is there, that is the most important. So that's what is supposed to be built up. Make use of every opportunity to learn from disasters, because the lessons learned will give you the strong footing and achieve that must be studied on the lessons after every disaster. And 10, bring about greater cohesion in international response to the disasters, so that internationally we are able to take. Now towards the end, the way forward is we need to mainstream disaster risk reduction to fully incorporate disaster risk reduction into relief and development policy, and to practice radically expand and enhance disaster risk reduction to make it a normal practice. All right, we it should be normal practice, like for birthday party, for marriage anniversary celebrations, you plan and you follow the normal practice. What should be the food item, what should be the whom to call, what should be the dress, where to organize. So the normal practice, especially with reference to disaster risk reduction, should be like any of the program and should be fully institutionalized within the framework. Thorough risk assessment is supposed to be done. Response capacity building is supposed to be taken care of. Training on mountain and northeastern state specific subjects is a must. Involvement of training infrastructure. capacity building for post disaster needs assessment, so that later on, after the disaster, to cope up from the disaster, there is a post disaster needs assessment is there. This is very very important aspect, because how much money to support the region after the disaster is very very important. So we need to build the capacity. All development sector must imbibe the principles of disaster risk management. There is a need to have a proper research, so that the 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 in-depth research to know the impact of the climate change, and everything should be studied. The adaptation strategies should be completely involve community-based disaster risk reduction plans and all. Building resilience and adapting to changes, traditional knowledge and nature-based solution. These two traditional, as I told you, that these are not occurring for the first time. They have been occurring. So there have been lot of traditional knowledge is there. Lot of nature-based solutions are there. They should be combined with the modern science and technology to cope up with this. So with this, I have come to an end. So just you must understand that even with all our technology and the inventions that make modern life so much easier than it was once, it takes just one big natural disaster to wipe all that away and remind us that here on earth we are still at mercy of the nature. So remember that we are at mercy of the nature, so we need to take actions so that we are able to survive and pass on whatever we got from our earlier generation to the next generation.